Poor people who have dated rich people, what did you learn? How much easier it is to make money when you already have money. People born into money think they know what it's like to be middle class or poor, and sometimes even can make it sound convincing, but they honestly aren't even close to understanding. I've lived in 3 former meth labs as I grew up thinking McDonald's was treating myself. I worked 40 hours a week at a gas station while taking 21 credit hours at a public university. Now I'm a department-led engineer at a pharmaceutical company. When I hear the stories about all my GF's rich classmates in a prestigious MBA program going to Europe for studying, really just taking Molly and clubbing all night while the school pays for it, I cringe like hell. They get snobby about if a job makes less than 6 figures and imply that's low middle class. We're in the Midwest where that's upper middle class. This shit right here. I had an acquaintance from high school who had his parents pay for a down payment on his first house when he was 24, asking me why I never bought a house. It's such a great investment, no shit, Sherlock. But right now, I don't have $40,000 to drop on a house down payment. Most of America doesn't have that. Just get rich parents. You answered your own question. I learned just how productive having money can be. Something needs to be fixed, replaced. We can afford to. Want to do something fun or adventurous? Sure, let's do it now. Want to eat healthier? We can afford all the ingredients. Like, what do you mean your life isn't slowed down by a million different things that need fixing, upgrading, replacing, saved for? I worked for a rich couple for a while, and that was what made the biggest impression on me. If there was a problem, it was fixed. Simple as that. No hand-wringing about the cost, no sleepless nights wondering how they'd survive with this latest setback, no weeks or months of sacrificing to save up the money, no arguments over finances, no letting the problem get worse because we just can't afford to fix it right now, and no agonizing decisions about which bills we can pay this month and which we should ignore. If there was a problem, it was fixed, and fixed well. Simple as fucking that. I'm not even jealous of how much money they had, just how well they must sleep at night compared to my poor ass. This is something I've realized about my own childhood. I never really considered my family wealthy because of course you don't see your normal life as special like that, but every time we ever had an issue of any kind my parents just called someone to fix it immediately. I never mowed the lawn or vacuumed the floors. There were people to handle that. My dad said it was dumb for him to do handy projects around the house when he could just do some more work and use the money to hire an expert to do a better job. It makes a ton of sense, provided you make enough money. I'm now an adult with no useful handyman skills and I can't afford to get help when something breaks, lol. Dated a man who didn't work, lived off of a trust fund. Oddly, since he could afford nearly anything, nothing had any value. He'd buy a $400 KitchenAid mixer, and burn it up making Christmas candy the first week. If he decided to make more candy, he'd just go buy another $400 mixer. Nothing meant particularly anything to him. I'm just impressed someone broke a KitchenAid. I'm pretty sure that thing would win a fight versus my house's foundation. If you're a gamer and you have cheat codes or god codes, they get extremely boring after a few minutes. Like the Matrix said, we tried to create a perfect world but the humans seemed to reject that. We don't want easy mode. Doesn't mean we want nightmare mode. I wish life had a regular setting. I love the philosophy of that, but I'd be pretty content finding new ways to challenge myself with a trust fund, lol. Egg, you'd be surprised. I'm an accountant and I work with 3 trust fund kids, and not like the little trust fund types. I mean they each have $1 million in liquid assets available at all times because them's the rules for the trust. The rest of each trust is somewhere north of $10 to $15 million each, where about half earns interest at a cool 5% guaranteed. The other half is invested elsewhere. Last year in the market highs, they had a lot more than $10 million each. Anyway, these kids are almost brain dead. They all work, because they have dreams related to a career path. But none of them can keep a job because, surprising as it may be, you generally can't take PTO after you've used all your PTO, so they just go get a new job. That seems crazy, but this is the kind of thing someone who is wealthy can do. Job security is no longer an asset to them. It's actually a liability. And you'll find a lot of things that for the normal folks are assets, quickly become liabilities. In the end, the kids are listlessly floating in life. The younger two are approaching 30 years old and haven't really done much for themselves. The older one at least is a mom of 3, happily married, and owns a productive farm in Idaho with her husband. This is probably why the old saying goes that inherited money is usually gone within 3 generations. My wife's family has no concept of what a workday is. To never have to open Workday again? Now that's the dream. How real the network or bubble of it is. It's like the other side from the "it's expensive being poor" concept. It's this weird internal community of people with money, and thus power, who are willing to make things happen as long as you're in. I mean, I would meet people at a fundraiser or something and 5 minutes later, they are happy to make a call that will get me a job at some huge firm. Or like, my then boyfriend would say, "Let's go this concert. Tickets are $180 but it's okay, but a friend's parents have a box, so we'll just join them." Or even one time the dishwasher in our flat broke, but we didn't have to pay a dime for repairs, because his friend from high school's parents own the building, so they are fixing it for free as a favor. Just made me realize how expensive being poor is. They never have debt, never need to look at their balance to see if they can buy food, never pay interest on overdue bills, etc. Oh, the really rich have a ton of debt, but they have so much money and assets that they borrow that money for peanuts. Their actual cash is invested in ways that makes them much more money than their debts costs them. Want to buy a $5 million house? Borrow $5 million and the interests on your 100 million inches assets will cover the loan easily. The reason that the rich were so rich, Vimes reasoned, was because they managed to spend less money. Take Boots, for example. He earned $38 a month plus allowances. A really good pair of leather boots cost $50. But an affordable pair of boots, which were sort of okay for a season or two and then leaked like hell when the cardboard gave out, cost about $10. Those were the kind of boots Vimes always bought, and wore until the soles were so thin that he could tell where he was in Ankh-Morpork on a foggy night by the feel of the cobbles. But the thing was that good boots lasted for years and years. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time. While a poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. This was the Captain Samuel Vimes Boots theory of socio-economic unfairness. 1. When I started in the working world, 1993 or so, I worked in a shirt and tie environment. Someone told me to buy 2 pairs of dress shoes and alternate wearing them so that they'll last longer, and the man was right. His parents had money, not him, because we were teens at the time. Even though his dad tried getting him to work to earn his money and not just give handouts, it was still a very different mindset of he wanted a luxury lifestyle but wouldn't go to work more than a couple days a week. Dropped out of college with less than a semester, just couldn't stick to things if it was too long. Delayed gratification. Meanwhile, I was working 2 jobs and had a full course load. My parents helped and I lived with them, but we still scraped by and I had to pay for my own things. I learned I was satisfied with a lot less material things. I was better ready to be on my own than he was, and I had a higher work ethic, more realistic view of the world. Interesting how sometimes people born into money become lazy, and sometimes it doesn't matter. For example, the heavyweight champion of the world Tyson Fury was driving a Mercedes at 16. Both of the exceptionally rich men I dated were so out of touch with reality. The detail that sticks out is that one of them just didn't know how to talk about anything else. I'd ask him about movies or books or music, and he had no opinions. And I could tell it made him uncomfortable not to have the upper hand in the conversation. I think he thought I was a pretty simple country girl, and was surprised that I had thoughts and opinions. So he'd fall back on asking me variations of "if money wasn't an issue, what would you?" just for him to say, "Well, I could make that happen for you." When I answered, got old real fast. Did not take the rejection well at the end of the night. Huge fat baby man. This is probably the biggest takeaway I had with my brief brush with the wealthy crowd. I dated 2 guys who were wealthy. One was generational, and one was new money. I hung out with their friends and they were nice enough. But good God, we would be at a rave doing Molly and I would still overhear them talking about finance and the market. It was wild. Money is their life. That's it. Sex, drugs, love, sadness, general life experiences, the human condition. None of it was as important or pleasurable as money was to them. I really can't imagine being at a rave with great music and people and wanting to talk about finance. That's so sad. Yes, exactly. That's when I knew it wouldn't work out. I lament that relationship because he was hot and kind. We just had nothing in common besides finding each other sexy. And I know this selfish, but I cannot listen to finance bros talk the rest of my life. I can't. Rich doesn't cure alcoholism. Addiction is a bitch. Having money to spend means you have resources to go to therapy or other services, sure, but that's not what an addicted brain is going to spend the money on. Not worrying about finances, it's hard to resist the temptation to waltz down to the liquor store. Hell, you can even make a second trip later, you can afford it. Honestly, the times that I improved my condition the most were the times I had negative bank balance and a bag of rice to last 2 weeks. I can't trust my brain to not make bad decisions when they are available to me. Also, if you're in the bigger money-making positions at work, you're probably going to be going to events, or taking clients out for meals, or going to conferences, etc., where there's an expectation of having alcohol, or staying out for drinks after, which can make it very difficult even for those actively trying to quit. I'd say the biggest advantage in terms of quitting, though, is that richer people generally have a better support network when it comes to their social life, which is the largest difference maker in breaking addictions. But that's not always the case. There are definitely some lonely rich people out there. The difference between having money and having wealth. You grew up poor and worked hard and finally got $10,000 in the bank and your income keeps you afloat? Cool. But that is nothing compared to a 50-acre family farm with a couple houses on it, several generations of inheritance that will fall in your lap someday, family business or family connections to lucrative opportunities, savings, investments, cash hidden in safes, piles of gold jewelry. If they suddenly lost all their checking and savings accounts, they'd still be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and wouldn't have to worry even for a second where their next meal would come from. Edit. Also, owning cars you don't even need or ever drive. Hordes of stuff sitting around cause you never had to move or sell stuff to buy food. Lines of credit being thrown at you. Spent first 8 years of my adult life with a woman whose parents had money. She had no conception of how hard life could be if you couldn't just sell stocks to buy a new car, or have someone give you a couple thousand to put you up in a new place. She pocketed her paycheck every 2 weeks. When we went out, I paid for gas. I bought dinner. Didn't think much about it at the time because we were engaged. When we broke up, she had $30,000 in her savings account and I was broke. Growing up with money is like hitting every green light and not having to worry about traffic jams. And it really fucks with your ability to empathize with people. My favorite expression is born on third base, but think they hit a triple. That we're hardly even playing the same game, never mind by the same rules. I dated a girl from old money, generational inherited wealth, grandpa's money, some corporate bigwig banker or something to that effect. I don't think her father ever worked a day in his life, and her mother clearly came from money as well. Outside of her, I found every one of her family members out of touch and completely unrelatable. I got real good at biting my tongue when my ex's siblings would complain about not getting a new car for their birthday when last year's model is sitting in the driveway. They had no concept of the value of money and never had to do anything for themselves to get what they wanted. I wasn't exactly poor growing up, but for the most part, if it wasn't strictly necessary for survival, I didn't have it. It was really eye-opening how everything was taken for granted. Those specific people would be helpless in the real world if they lost all their dough.